Welcome to the Emerging Minds Families Podcast.
Hi, I'm Alicia Ranford and you're listening to an Emerging Minds Families podcast. Before we start today's episode, we would like to pay respect to the traditional custodians of the land on which this podcast is recorded, the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains. We also pay respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, their ancestors and elders past, present and emerging from the different First Nations across Australia. In this episode, we're going to be talking about navigating pornography and sexualised media content with children and young people. If you have little ears listening, you might want to listen another time, or if you feel this topic may bring up difficult feelings for you, perhaps give this week a miss and join us next fortnight. Or you can find resources for support in our show notes. Welcome to episode 2 of our conversation with Dan Principe, who is a very passionate youth advocate and educator. If you missed last fortnight, I highly recommend you go back and take a listen. Dan gave us some amazing insights in how to navigate the landscape of pornography with our young people and really help to unpack the difficulties of navigating this space with them. This week, we're going to pick up where we left off, as well as delving into masculinity and how we can support our young boys to grow into wonderful young men. And I wanted to start by asking, Dan, do you ever hear any surprising attitudes from parents related to pornography use as you travel around Australia presenting on these topics?
What's hard is the people who are most proactive, who rock up, who you engage with, are the switched on ones. So it's a bias. So I'm engaging with a lot of educators, parents, community members who are switched on, realize this is a challenge, we need to do something about it, and are really engaged in those conversations. So not so much, I don't get much of that, but again, that is the bias of the catchment of those who clearly realize this is an issue and want to do something about it. So that's going to filter out the people who don't respond positively to either of those options. But yeah, not so much, to be honest. I think it's pretty hard to argue with the impacts. And my biggest shift in proof of this, other than the empirical evidence, and it's not to say that it's 100% there, chase the money trail if you want to actually get to the bottom of some of it. But 5 years ago in the media, it's like, Dan, you're making the case that pornography is harmful to young people. Can't believe we had to make that case. But you'd have to kind of back it up with here's the Australian Institute of Family Studies report. This is what Our Watch has got to say. This is, what the Children's Commission has got, and you'd be ready to go with all of your research. Whereas now it's more we know this is impacting young people. Police are seeing it, psychologists are seeing it, parents are seeing it, teachers are seeing it in sexualized language. It's an obvious manifestation of this. And it's what are we going to do about it is now what we get asked. What are we going to do about this phenomenon? So that's been a pleasant surprise. There's less having to make the case. There is still a huge part of society that I think is very uncomfortable about this. And I think in Australian culture, we banter about a lot of things. And one of them is sex or sexuality. And what I want to just normalize is, can we have some mature conversations about this? Surely we can do that. Yeah. Kind of have a rule of thumb, if you're not mature enough to talk about this, you're probably not ready enough to be engaged in this. And so that's kind of where I take this and ask year 9 boys, what's missing from pornography? And their answers are incredible. Do you want to hear what they've got to say?
I would love to hear what they've got to say.
So it all started, I asked the older boys this, to get them critically thinking, assessing this. And then one day I was just having such a terrific session. I was in regional Queensland and I whispered into the head of wellbeing's ear. I said, these boys are just lapping up everything. We'd unpack stereotypes, coercive control, year 9 boys, green flags, red flags in relationships, power, gender, all this stuff. And they're engaged. And yes, sometimes it can be performative, they might know the right answers to give you, but hey, they're still saying that in front of their mates. I still take that as a win. And I said to the head of, I've got to give them something more. They're just doing such a good job. And he agreed. And I said, look, I'm going to ask them this question. I'm just going to put it up on the projector. And I said, boys, off you go in your small groups. 120 boys. This hall is roaring with energy. It's this is either going really well or really bad, We'll find out in a few moments. And I said, boys, as you know, no one's pressured to ever share anything today. But if you want to answer like this and speak and tell us what's missing from porn, come to the front. 15 boys ran to the front, ready to go. And in front of their mates, they took different turns and they said this in front of 120 other boys. It doesn't show consent, doesn't show intimacy, emotional connection, romance, love, communication, what else they enjoy outside the bedroom. Do they actually have a relationship? Do they care for each other?
Isn't that beautiful?
Incredible that you would have teenage boys, year 9s, in front of their mates saying that love, maybe intimacy, emotional connection should have something to do with this significant act, incredible. So I don't doubt their ability to share their insights and empathy. It's the courage to like live that out when there's so much pressure, especially in boys. And this is fundamental to my work. It's not just talking about pornography, but the pressures on boys to conform to this callous, rigid, uncaring vision of masculinity. That's not who they truly are, but who they very much feel pressured to perform for their mates and for broader social expectations.
And that leads us nicely into thinking about how we can raise good men. There are a lot of wonderful men out there.
Absolutely.
There's a lot in the media about violence against women. What are the keys to raising good boys?
How long you got? Can we
How long can you stay awake for?
Forever. Once you get me talking about this, like, can we reorder society around what actually matters most, integrating the best of the old with where we need to be in a new world? You know, like, I think we've lost sight of things as much as things have advanced, but there's some old wisdom that we've forsaken, especially when it comes to boys. And I don't know if that's serving us. I'm not saying let's go back to the 1950s, the 1550s. I'm just saying things that were always associated with masculinity, like virtue, is neglected, and to all of our detriment. Once upon a time, if you read how, not saying all men, but how men regarded one another and what was expected of them in terms of decency. I mean, hence we have a word gentleman, right? And this isn't, again, saying let's hark back to the olden days, and I don't want to view it through rose-tinted glasses because there's awful, awful things that we've needed to fight for and recalibrate in our culture. And we're still doing that. But yeah, I think today it seems like a race to the bottom. Boys are not being pressured by social norms to conform to being a gentleman, to being decent, to having a sense of how to act in such situations. We're seeing a failure to launch. We're seeing an increased infantilization of boys. We're seeing boys falling so far behind in secondary and tertiary education. We're seeing this across the Western world. And it's not about who's winning out of boys and girls. It's not about that, but they're checking out of leadership, taking on responsibility. That should alarm all of us. And people are writing about this. And it's like, why is that? What has shifted? And it can be so easy to view this as this zero-sum game of like, well, if boys succeed and girls aren't, vice versa. It's not that. There's lots of room at the table here, but clearly we've failed to translate a message for boys about what's worth aspiring to in terms of who they are and who they're becoming. And I think when you remove virtue, traditionally known as things like love and courage and respect and honor and decency, like, it's like, well, who should I be? And right now, there are some pretty significant bad faith actors who get a lot of attention for reinforcing the very worst traits that we want to see in young men. This performative toughness, this callousness, preying on their insecurities. And I think one of the biggest things, and I'm not an expert to speak on this, but I do read about it and I contemplate it often in my summer breaks, is rites of passage. We've got a lot to learn from previous generations and from, of course, our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander brothers and sisters in this space, you know, how their cultures initiate boys and what that looks like, and going through that and how then you relate to yourself and other people relate to you. We kind of don't have those markers. And here in Australia, boys will default to drinking, fighting, doing stupid things and having sex to prove that they're a man, amongst some other unhelpful traits as well. And I think that's something that we have to work out and reimagine for our context. Like, we're not going back to pre-industrial revolution, but what does that look like? And of course, because of the industrial revolution, men, uncles, grandfathers were then going off into offices and factories and spending less time in the lives of young men. That's been a huge shift that we've not really considered. Like, unless you're a sailor, a military man, like, you had a shop, you worked in a farm, you know, like, you lived and men were involved more in home life. I'm not saying always, but they were. I'm not saying it was perfect either. But that has been a huge structural shift for young men. Huge. In ways that I think we just forget, like, because we just know our context. We know our known. We're all goldfish in our bowl. And so when I think about that and how radical a shift that's actually been, what I see as a great trend is men being far more involved now, this generation, in the home life and in child raising. I think that's one of the more positive shifts, and so much more in that needs to be done and encouraged through structure, policy, workplace arrangements, how we even just understand our gender roles and not feeling insecure about maybe saying, hey, I'm a dad. I want to work 3 days a week because I want to spend more time with my kids. How wonderful. And so, yeah, there's more to be done culturally there, but I see the effects of that with boys who are just so desperate for male validation. And if we don't initiate them, if we don't give them opportunities to be challenged and encouraged and have opportunities to grow, not just what they think and can pass a test, but who they are, because we neglect that. We're so interested in the academic, we're not interested in formation of character. And that's to all, like, that's all of us have been affected by that. And so if we don't give them these opportunities, they're going to look to other uninitiated boys to prove that they're a real man, a tough guy. And by doing stupid things that are going to impress their mates to get a round of applause. The reality is we will all become like the people whose opinions matter most to us. Whoever we're seeking validation from, that is who we're going to become more like in terms of their values and their beliefs. And so we owe it to boys to create better pathways, to celebrate other elements of what it is to be a man. Now, don't hear me in a poor light here. I'm not saying we need to celebrate and erect statues for basic human decency, right? But I've just asked 3 groups of boys today, tell me, boys, have you had people actually pay you a sincere compliment where they notice and encourage something about your character versus how much trolling, banter, tearing down? What's the ratio? 100 to 1, 200 to 1, never?
That's really heartbreaking, isn't it?
Had a year 12 just last week saying to me, I don't know what my strengths are. I'm not judging him, but I'm like, how sad that no one has helped you or seen the good, the gold in you and called that out and said, oh, do you know you're brilliant at that? Do you know like how you live with integrity, how you do this diligently? I think how sad. Because if we don't actually have a healthy sense of self that's anchored in reality, not fake, affirmations and fluff, but actually someone seeing who you for truly are and nurturing the good in you. Yeah, like you're just so prone to be insecure and played by everyone around you. And that's my worry for boys. And so we actually need to build them up with grounded confidence. I'm not worried about arrogance. I'm worried about the insecurity that masks as this false bravado and causes chaos everywhere it goes. We actually want boys to be grounded, to know who they are, so they're not so swayed by culture, by the pack, that they can actually stand up for themselves when peer pressure swirls around them. And so, yeah, when they're not actually being praised for the decent things that they do well, that worries me. And I say that for all young people. I want girls to be so secure in themselves so they're not preyed on by the culture that, is absolutely stripping them and coming after them. There's so much to be said about that. It's tragic. It's heartbreaking. And so, yeah, for boys, like helping them identify their strengths. What are you good at?
And their values, what they value in life, what type of human being do they want to be?
Totally. And I tell them, I said, I'm not going to do this because it sounds weird, but if I followed you for a day, I'd work out what you valued by what you celebrate, what stories you tell, and who your heroes are. It'll give me an indication of your frame of reference in life. And what would I find? And I encourage them, reflect on that. How would you answer that question? Who are your heroes? What do you celebrate? And what stories do you tell? Because it'll tell you a lot about you.
And so for younger children, what can parents do to help kids know their strengths? And I know that sounds like a silly question, but what things can parents say to their kids to reinforce their strengths?
I think not praising, especially girls, but all young people for how they look and their cuteness. Of course, they need to hear that from, like, you're beautiful, but like with girls, it's like your beauty is beyond the looks. Just like when boys say we should be strong. I'm like, yeah, are we talking about strength of character? Because how much you bench press isn't going to get it done through life. Like that's not going to help you in 99.99% of life right now. It's like, do you have strength of character? Who are you as a human? But I think noticing it and then giving them opportunities for it, knowing that that's what for me it is to nurture them, is to give them opportunities to discover their strengths. Like I'm not musically inclined. Okay. I can't sing. I'm not really that good with my hands. My sister got all that talent. Like, as in, she's so good at fixing things. And back to the stereotypes, like she'll own more power tools from Bunnings than I ever will. I love cooking. I love reading. I learned quickly that like, I like people and I feel like that's my strength, and had to learn to cultivate that and also learn things to be good at that so that I was competent in that. And so, yeah, I think just helping young people have opportunities to do different things and to identify their strengths in that, both in terms of their character. Like, because we all got different character. Like some of us are patient. Some of us are kind. Some of us are courageous. Some of us are like got great leadership. Some people are really caring, really thoughtful, really considerate, and helping them to see that and helping them to nurture areas where they could actually grow in. And so, yeah, I think just noticing that, giving them opportunities for it. I think, yeah, we maybe worry that our kids are going to get a big head. I'm more worried if that's like because they're staring at this thing too much and like taking too many selfies. Like that's more what I'm worried about, not because we've actually noticed the good in them and nurtured that and then given them opportunities to continue nurturing that. Because that's grounded. There's substance to that. The selfie stuff, like that's not going to get it done when life comes at us. that's not going to really give us the reserves that we need because 500 people liked my new profile picture.
And the digitalized world that we've spoken so much about today, that feeds into all of those insecurities, doesn't it? It feeds into, for young boys and girls, is changing the way their images are by using
filters, AI, all of it. I mean, it's a huge reality. Young boys navigating that. I mean, this generation sees more of other people's anatomy than ever before just because they've got phones. And I'm not just talking pornographic. I'm just mean all of it. They're just bombarded with it nonstop. It's like when I deleted all my socials for a few years because I was one of those weirdos working in media, politics who had 2 phones. And I was like, my head is cooked. I deleted it all, went back on it, and my homepage on Instagram was just girls in bikinis. That's just what the algorithm kept serving me. And that's what it serves these young people, whether they've looked for it or not. And it keeps showing them these idealized lifestyles, idealized bodies that are fake. And then these young people get more discouraged when they compare it to their own, even though it's like, you're 14. You can't have that man's body. You can't have his vision of success that's probably fake. But, you know, like that's where I feel it's so unfair for them. And I hear this a lot from parents is these unrealistic expectations. When I ask parents the question in my talk straight up front, I usually ask them, what are you worried about? What are some of the bigger challenges? And they say these unrealistic expectations of success that young people just can't measure up to because they just see the 30-second snapshot reel and no idea of whether that's true, but also what is the hard work, the diligence, the sacrifice that's going on in the background, whether it's any pursuit, creative, athletic, academic, like what's gone on to get to that point. So that is a huge challenge, not just aesthetically, but yeah, for life, success, meaning, all these sorts of things. The nonstop FOMO, fear of missing out, you know, because back in the day, we probably went to parties and we had no idea that we were missing out if there were parties going on as well, you know, like, whereas it's all broadcast for them. It's all broadcast for them. So yeah, this is tapping in. It's not making them feel good about themselves. There's research out there that says for girls especially, like I think 10, 15 minutes of scrolling and their mood drops.
Wow, that's not long at all, is it? And it's so fast and quick and their brains don't have downtime, do they? And that's a whole nother topic.
And just to critically think through it, like they're not going, oh, is this a fake image? Is this altered? Like you're just seeing something that's an idealized version of it and it's changing and it's a movable feast. And that's where I think we have to take back to first principles and what are we going to ground them in and encourage them in, because culture will change, especially for girls. And I know I'm not here to talk about this, but like I talk about it with all young people, boys and girls. It's like beauty standards will change. When I was in high school, there's pressure for girls to be heroin chic, stick thin, horrific. Now what is it? Oh, it's curvy and athletic, and it'll change again. And then there's micro trends within trends, you know, like it's so unfair to hitch our wagon for validation and acceptance in that. And it's so important that we help young people think critically through it. But it's not just the thinking, it's the feeling. Like so much of it is how we feel and what we're valued for. And that's the biggest thing that I try to challenge when I say in my tagline, like to champion boys, to champion girls, to champion youth, and to challenge culture. I want to challenge this idea that the least interesting, the least important part of you is how you look. And I'm so sorry, I say to young people, that we have a culture that's just interested in this and what you own and what you wear and how you look, and has neglected like how important this is.
And I feel like it's exhausting as a parent to be worrying about this. I can't even imagine being a young person that is bombarded with these images and everything that they see on social media. It must be absolutely exhausting.
I can't imagine it. And then you add the screen time to it. I asked these year 5s and 6s last week, how do you know you've had too much screen time? When my head starts to hurt, when my hands get hot, when my head gets hot, when they get like kind of that sense of discomfort. And of course, they can't regulate that. Like, do you then get off? Some of them, but like, no, like they're clocking up some numbers and up late at night, like screen time and how it's affecting them. So yeah, I think we need to collectively as the village help make it easier to normalize like screen time only for certain times in certain rooms of the house. I want to be very gentle when I say this, but I've been chatting with like police and other cyber safety. I'm not a cyber safety expert, but like I've been chatting with them about this. And like, there's such this over worry about like, I hear from young people and sometimes even parents about like children being kidnapped, this kind of white van worry, which it happens, but it's so rare. What I'm worried about is what's happening on here late at night, like catfishing for boys. Fastest growing crime where teen boys and guys in their early 20s are being catfished, tricked into sending naked images of themselves and blackmailed online because they think they're talking to a cute girl who's flirting with them.
Oh, that's so sad.
It is so sad. And our E-Safety Commissioner, Australian Federal Police, and ACE, which is the Australian Centre to Counter Child Exploitation, ACE with triple C, is doing all it can to educate on this. And these aren't some weirdos stuck in their mum's basement doing this. These are organised crime syndicates in other nations that are grooming kids all across the world into trying to trick them to send naked images. And the primary victim here in Australia is like 95% of teenage boys or guys in their early 20s.
And we're hoping our kids have enough common sense to say no to this when it's actual crime syndicates that are targeting them. I mean,
we'd like to think that, but that's clearly not happening.
No.
And I was alarmed in many sessions of like where young people don't know what to do when this happens. I don't want it to happen, but it's like, do you know who to speak to, where you'd go to? So we've got to educate on that. And that's the triaging if things go badly. And we need to know that there's support for them because obviously we've lost young boys who have taken their lives when this has happened to them. I met a young boy who said to me, "Sir, this happened to me when I was in year 10 and I had to learn this lesson the hardest way." And he was like head boy of one of the top schools in this country. And boys need to hear this and parents need to hear this, that you can bounce back from this. But he had to tell his parents and he said, "I had to learn a really hard lesson." It was embarrassing, but he's going to go on and flourish in life because of the young man that he is. So yeah, where there's so much education around it, I see guys who are being tricked in their early 20s. I met 2 year 12 boys last year in Queensland. And one guy said it happened to my mate and I knew it happened to him and it still happened to me. And part of my heartbreak from it, and again, I can't make too many assumptions, is I see how loneliness and insecurity is preyed on. And of course, a frontal lobe that hasn't fully developed yet. And if you're sitting there and you're lonely and you're insecure and maybe you're a bit bored and all of a sudden some cute girl's giving you attention and you're like, well, this is nice. Not always going to make the best decisions. And heck, we didn't have to navigate that.
No, you're right. Dan, I want to ask you, for parents who are listening today, if they go and have these fantastic conversations with their children and young people, and they do learn through asking questions and being curious, like we've talked about, that perhaps their children are engaging in pornographic content. Mm. What advice have you got for them if they realise that things are maybe a little bit out of control? Yeah. What can they do to support their kids to get back on track?
Yeah. Take a huge deep breath and play the long game. Yeah. It's unfortunate. It's a reality. It doesn't have to be the defining factor in this young person's life, and we have to play the long game here. So yeah, we can't shame them. No one gets healthier in shame. We also at the same time have to hold the tension of like how this could be impacting them and their future and their relationships. So we need to hold that intention, the empathy and the significance of this. And I think the biggest thing is like getting their sense of how they perceive it. Because some young people will say to me, not everyone subscribes to an addiction framework, but they will come up to me and say, "I'm addicted." And I'm not going to correct them or say this, what do you mean? But like, that's how they have made sense of it because they're like, I can't shake this. I can't go a day or two without watching it. So you would want to get a sense of like, are they aware of its impact on them? Are they disliking that impact? Because of course, if you're like, "Oh, this is working for me," like, why would you do anything different? And again, you can't lead that. They have to like be like, "No, this is actually something I'm struggling with." And given how many boys say that once they're given the space and hopefully the compassion to say so, they're like, "Yeah, I see this. I see what it's done to me. I've seen how it's impacted me, what it's done to my thoughts, blah, blah, blah," whatever it might be. And it's like, okay, great. That's something to work with. Until someone gets to that point though, like you can't. And I think from there, it's like, well, what do we do? This is like the most under-resourced area that I can think of is it's like for adults, it's like, yeah, you could go to a psychologist, a sex addiction fellowship. Like there's things out there, but where do teenage boys go? So of course they go online and they see a lot of this. There's a lot on YouTube, on Reddit, where people are talking about like how this has impacted them. And a really big reason for that is because some of them, it's like once it affects their sexual function, that's when they're like, "Oh, I better take this seriously now." And I could talk more about that, but let's stay on this. And so they're usually going online because like who wants to go if you're a young man who's struggling with, even if you said, "I'm addicted, I can't break it, I hate what this has done to my mind, my thoughts, my brain," who wants to go and sit and like with a psych and talk about it? So this is the tough thing. They may well need to and get to the heart of it because I am not in all instances, but I do subscribe to what is the need that they're trying to meet through this. Because it's not the same. I think a lot of people go, "Oh, people watch porn because they're horny or sexually cute." Yeah, that's a part of it. Sure. Maybe. Do you know for sure? Because what I've seen in the research and when I speak to therapists, it's like, wow, there's actually a lot more going on here, especially when you ask them, what are your triggers? When are you most likely? When are you susceptible? And they're usually in low mood states. They're not saying, oh yeah, I was just on the top of the world, succeeding in life, having a good time, feeling so connected to myself, my partner, and just went down that rabbit hole. Yeah. Like you don't hear that. There's usually other things going on. Not always, but most of the time. It's just so hard for young people themselves to like say, I'm going to do this. I actually think we need more of the structural things to help them and the good things to go after, because my message isn't don't watch porn and that's it. Because you cannot watch pornography, but that doesn't mean you're thriving. Doesn't mean you're fully alive, connected to community, family, relationships, finding your strengths, contributing to the world. Like that's actually the end goal. Yeah. And so finding those outlets for them, I think is so helpful, and filling it with something positive, helping them with boundaries. But I think asking them, how could we support you? What would this actually look like? Do you feel like you need more help? Because willpower is not going to get it done. Again, in their words, like what do you need from us? Would you need us to put a blocker in place? Do you want to talk about this with somebody? Do you need an older male friend? You know, what could it look like? And there is software that exists that they could download as well. So Fight the New Drug is a great resource. Connected to that, they have an app called Fortify that also has like these sorts of things that help you to reboot. There's lots of this out there now. There's more and more people creating these sorts of resources to help others. And so, yeah, that could be an actual outlet for it. It just depends, you know, and it depends on their age, how significant it is, right? I've met people. I interviewed a guy once upon a time. He was looking at porn 7 hours a day. He's now sober 8 years and runs a sex addiction fellowship helping other men. I think this is a huge area that is so under-resourced that I can't just sit here and say, well, hear this. Go for this. There is a sense of like, I just want to hopefully stop how much of this that gets into their heads and hearts, because I don't want them to be desensitized so that it would escalate.
I love what you said about when you ask kids and have conversations with these kids about what do you need to help you, that children and young people actually come with a lot of amazing ideas about what they need and strategies that could support them and that they would stick to.
I have a principles sheet that I give to young boys, and it's like a bit of a stock take, and then like getting them to think through their triggers. So in my little statement, it's just like, what are your triggers? Bored, tired, lonely, sad, hungry, like what's going on, you know, and then get them to do a stock take of their life and like 9 areas of their life, and could be more areas, but like everything from like mindfulness, to how you structure your environment, your digital environment, your bedroom. What are your like hobbies that you're doing? What's your food diet like? You know, like, and just do a stock take. Like, is the way that I'm structuring my life conducive to me choosing the good things? Or is it making it harder? Because I said to the boys today, like if you got home and you've got chores and homework or other things to do, and you just go and sit straight on the couch with your phone, that's going to make it a lot harder to go and do those other things. Whereas as we know, if you want to take up a new habit, like make it easier. Like if you want to start running, like make sure your running gear is set up once you get home from school or work. So it's like, okay, there's the cue. That's what I'm doing next. Have like a good snack or hydration thing that's maybe going to give you a little kick. So like you just do these things to make it easier for you. And I think that's a big part of it for boys, helping them to think through something like a series of principles and stock take on this. But at the end of it, I do say, do you need professional support? Because I don't want to diminish that given the challenges that we're facing. And on that note, we have seen, and I know this used to be contested, I don't think it is as much, is the rise of porn-induced erectile dysfunction. First time in human history, we have adolescent boys, guys in their 20s, presenting to pelvic floor clinicians, specialists, GPs, therapists, saying, I'm struggling to either get or maintain an erection. And their partners have told me, I thought this was about me. And it's like, I thought I wasn't hot enough, attractive enough, desirable enough. I'm like, no. Because let's say to the boys, how you experience your body, sensuality, another person's body, what you believe about sex, your ideas, like this matters a lot. Right. And so this used to be contested, but now we're even seeing ads, you know, those like ads where they try to sell like similar to Viagra type medications, like over the internet. They're even putting the hook in, like, is porn affecting you? Like, it's for me, it's like, this is not worth debating because you've heard it from the partners. I see it in Reddit and YouTube comment sections of guys who talk about rebooting because they're rebooting their brain body connection to this. And then my dad bumped into my family GP last summer, and he hasn't seen me, my family GP hasn't seen me in like, I don't know, 10 or 12 years. Said, what's your son doing these days? And I always laugh thinking, I wonder how my parents answer that.
How does dad describe it?
Yeah, answer that question. They're big supporters, love them, grateful for them. And he told him, and he said, I I'd love to chat to him. So I literally just booked in, saw him, had a checkup, and I said, Doc, like, what are you seeing in your clinic? And he said, oh, Dan, like, I'm having guys in their late teens and early 20s coming in here asking me for Viagra. And I said, what do you put it down to? And we both knew the answer. And he said, what they're watching. They're more interested in the screen than the real thing. It's not doing it for them. And that's the worry for me in terms of the desensitization. And again, it's not to say, because I don't want to be misquoted and cancelled. I'm not saying if you watch porn, your PP will stop working and I'm fear-mongering. It's just like, this is a risk factor. You don't, when you go on a porn site, it's not like a packet of smokes or alcohol where it's like, this has risk factors. There's a little warning notification that says this could impact you. You don't get that on a porn site saying this could make you feel lonely. This could make you judge your body or other people's bodies. This could affect your sexual function. This could actually contribute to the exploitation of another person in the world. Which was a big driving factor of why I walked away from this. And so we've seen that, and we don't get that information. There's not enough of it out there. And so for me, the reason I actually have hope is because I'm like, I could understand if boys are like, Dan, we've heard this all before, like, give it a rest, but they haven't. They haven't had an opportunity to have these comprehensive, age-appropriate conversations from when they're little to address the world they're navigating and then to think through it. That's what gives me hope to keep doing this, because I get to see their insights and empathy when we give them those opportunities. And I just think they need more of them.
Dan, it has been really great having you with us here. Thank you so much for your time. And I just wondered, before you leave us, from all of our conversations, if a parent listening remembers nothing else, what message would you want them to take away today?
There's two things, really. I think for me, it's realizing that this isn't a reflection on your child's character or on your capacities as a parent. Have you failed them? It's a reflection of, we are raising children in a time that's never been more difficult with vested billion and trillion dollar interests. So just to have empathy for young people, to be curious about them, their lives, and to just have empathy for them. They're living in a very, very different world. And there's plenty of time for consequences. They might be needed, but our goal is to connect.
Dan, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. What a great conversation.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Visit our website at www.emergingminds.com.au/families for a wide range of free information and resources to help support child and family mental health. Emerging Minds leads the National Workforce Centre for Child Mental Health. The centre is funded by the Australian Government Department of Health under the National Support for Child and Youth Mental Health program.